Greece, the home of ancient monuments, Ouzo and Moussaka, and the venue for the fourth round of this year's FIA World Rally Championship, the Acropolis Rally. The 1994 rally winner, Carlos Sainz, led the competitors away from what must be the most picturesque start venue in the series, underneath the Parthenon in the capital city, Athens. The event is run on the mainland of Greece. Leg 1 comprised 8 special stages, which took the cars northwestwards from the start to the first overnight halt in the town of Kamina-Vorla. On the very first stage, it became clear that Colin McRae was a man on a mission. He was 30 seconds faster than anyone else through the stage, and it looked as though he was out to prove that his World Championship wasn't a fluke. Many observers had questioned his maturity following his accident in Indonesia, and the Scotsman was setting the record straight.
Into 3 right minus and 2 left.
Whatever their vantage points, the Greek spectators already sensed that they were in for a classic Acropolis. Second fastest through stage 1 was the Ford Escort of Carlos Sainz, and the stage saw the start of a battle for second place which would last for most of the day. Sainz would hold a 5-second advantage going into stage 2, but 3 other drivers had their own ideas about who should be chasing McRae. One of those was Tommi Mäkinen. Wins in Sweden and Kenya meant that he started the rally with a 5-point lead over Sainz in the World Championship. Mäkinen and his navigator Seppo Harjanne would in fact grab second place after stage 3 and would then have their sights set on McRae. As well as Mäkinen's Group A Mitsubishi, the team also had 2 Lancers running in Group N, the so-called showroom class. Their Belgian driver, Pascal Smets, didn't have the power to challenge the likes of McRae, but was in the top 3 in his class, despite losing a couple of seconds on this hairpin. His lack of power would contribute to the only major retirement of the first leg, when the Group A Toyota Celica of Thomas Rodstrom caught him on this downhill section. Rodstrom, the Swede, finished 6th on his home event back in February and had been inside the top 5 on his first visit to Greece until he was forced to run in the slower car's dust on stage 4 and an accident was almost inevitable. Concern and disappointment then for Toyota.
George, tell me, what's happened to Thomas?
Well, he has been catching a Group N car all morning. I think he's passed it several times. And he was actually catching his second Group N car in the one stage, running in the dust very heavily. And of course, it's a fright a minute, really. And eventually he fell foul of it just near the end of the stage, right above the service point. We saw it happening, believe it or not.
There's no chance of him coming out?
No, we saw the car roll. It came down the hill about 50 metres, somersaulting 6 or 7 times. But both drivers were on the radio within 30 seconds and said absolutely no problem.
You can see from his front wheels that Kenneth Eriksson too was having his share of problems. He broke his Subaru's steering on stage 6 and lost over 7 minutes, which dropped him out of the top 10. For Colin McRae, a time loss for a very different reason. A spin cost McRae and co-driver Derek Ringer only a few seconds, yet they weren't the only ones who were caught out at that spot. Carlos Sainz and Luis Moya were also forced to spin, and they also lost a little time. The reason for those spins can be seen from Tommi Mäkinen's in-car camera. Seen again, you can clearly make out on the right there's a large log blocking part of the stage, forcing some drivers to take a longer route than the one they'd practiced. By the time the next car, the Ford Escort of Bruno Thierry, goes through, the log has mysteriously disappeared, allowing Thierry to take the shortcut. Yet it's back again for the next car, Piero Liatti's Subaru.
There are 2 alternative routes round sort of effectively a hairpin bend, and it's always open and the drivers take their own route round it the fastest quite naturally. The marshals at the start of the stage said yes, it's open. It was open when the cars went through checking the road, and then some people put rocks and stones and logs to close one of the roads off. And Colin and Carlos both went off the road at that point, and quite clearly it's not being marshalled properly and not being supervised effectively, and naturally the drivers are very upset about the situation, as am I.
After viewing the in-car pictures, the rally organisers cancelled stage 6, which meant that Eriksson was reinstated to 3rd place. Effectively, his broken steering had never happened. And so to day 2, a day which would bring more controversy. The second leg contained a total of 7 stages in the mountains to the west of Kamina-Vorla. Like F1, World Rallying attracts hundreds of journalists, camera crews and photographers from all over the world.
Why the World Rally Championship?
Well, the World Rally Championship is such an exciting kind of championship to cover. We also cover Formula One, but in terms of photography, it's far more kind of photogenic and pleasurable to cover.
I love it for my job, because here we have all the teams together, so you don't have to run around and look for them. And on the stages, before the stages, you have the drivers for yourself, so you can make interviews and make pictures when they change tires and everything. For me, it's great.
It's a fun thing to do. You get to see nice places in the world. It's exciting. I just love rallying.
Despite 6 months away from the Ford team, Bruno Thierry would end day 2 in 6th place. Unbelievably, he'd had to complete one stage with the heater on to help lower the escort's temperature.
Sinistra 4 meno e destra 3 più. 30.
5th were the Italian duo Piero Liati and Fabrizio Pons in the Subaru.
E destra 4 più.
Their teammate Kenneth Eriksson, meanwhile, had dropped a place to 4th. Carlos Sainz was now 3rd. This unexpected shortcut gave one spectator a photograph he'll always remember. Tommy Mäkinen ended day 2 less than 45 seconds behind the rally leader, Colin McRae, who'd had another superb day, although 6 more stages were left, including the longest of the entire rally. As the rally continued, more and more of the crews expressed their mounting frustration over the controversial and seemingly endless variations to the servicing regulations, which saw them having to refuel their cars while their mechanics stood and watched.
I still don't understand why do we have to do it, because we are not asking for more service. We just say that when we have the service, use the full service, because I cannot see Schumacher in Formula One or Damon Hill putting the fuel in their cars while the mechanics are watching. I mean, it makes absolutely no sense.
The row would rumble on into the 3rd and final day. Leg 3 consisted of 6 special stages, none of which was less than 20 kilometres in length. The cars left Kamina Vorla at 8:30 in the morning for the long, hot drive back to Athens and the finishing ramp. Colin McRae's Subaru Impreza had led from the very first stage of the rally nearly 48 hours before. But with such a slender margin over Tommy Mäkinen, would the sight and sound of the Piper be enough to send McRae to his first Acropolis win? He began the day fairly well, although he was 3 seconds slower than Mäkinen on the very first stage. The events of the final day in Indonesia obviously hadn't been forgotten, although an incident on one corner of that first stage shows how determined McRae was to win. Mäkinen's Mitsubishi was charging on the morning of day 3. The Finn was fastest on the first 3 stages and took 20 seconds off McRae in a little over 70 kilometres. With the longest stage, over 30 kilometres still to come, we were now on course for an incredibly close finish. As the rally entered the final afternoon, all eyes were on the battle at the top. Further down the leaderboard, Bruno Thierry had lost 6th gear, although his escort was still hanging on to 6th position. There were more serious problems for the Subaru of Kenneth Eriksson. The Swede had to stop and change a puncture, which cost over 3 minutes and dropped him a place. That handed 4th to Piero Liati. Again, a steady, unremarkable drive was rewarding the Subaru team with valuable World Championship points. The speed at which the leading crews tackled the rough Greek stages was amazing. Even more so when you take a look at the kind of drops they were faced with should anything go wrong. Carlos Sainz would end the rally in 3rd place. After his victory here 2 years ago, many had predicted he'd take Ford's 2nd successive win of the year, but it wasn't to be. Mäkinen was still charging, but the stages had changed from the smoother, sandy surfaces of the morning to the rougher, rockier roads we'd seen over the previous 2 days. Tyre choice was once again all important.
Unfortunately, last couple of stages was so rough and we couldn't go flat out because tyre wearing was so bad.
So you decided to drive the last 2 stages and capitalise on 2nd and points?
Yeah, I had to do it.
By now, McRae was back in charge. Quickest on the first 2 stages of the afternoon, he looked set to take victory by nearly a minute. Then, as the cars headed for the final stage, an ominous rumble meant last-minute dramas for the Subaru team. McRae had a broken bearing in his Impreza's prop shaft, a job which would take his mechanics around 15 minutes to fix. But they only had 10, and to leave the service area late would mean starting to incur time penalties, so possibly handing the win to Mäkinen. Especially after what had happened in Indonesia, it was a cruel blow. After leading the rally for so long, would the world champion now lose it with only 25 kilometres left? In the end, the repair took just 9 minutes and the car reached the time control with 3 seconds to spare. A relieved David Richards watches as the marshals issue Derek Ringer with the correct time, and the car can start the last stage with a lead over Mäkinen of 42 seconds and no time penalties. Yet another fastest time on the final stage, his 10th of the rally, left McRae on the road section back to Athens, having led the rally from start to finish to take his first win of 1996.
Back to normal.
Yeah, relieved.
Was it a tough rally for you?
Yeah, very hard. Not knowing how quick to go. You can't drive 100% here because it's so rough. And it was getting a bit dodgy earlier on today, but it's worked out okay.
As one world champion celebrated, a former title holder had decided that enough was enough.
We are not going to put any more fuel in any more service, having the mechanics beside us. We have decided, the drivers, and FIA has to do something because it's the last rally we are going to make any refueling ourselves.
Confirmation of the final positions then. Colin McRae finished 50 seconds ahead of second place Tommy Mäkinen. Carlos Sainz finished third, Piero Liatti fourth, and Kenneth Eriksson's puncture dropped him to fifth. Bruno Thierry came home sixth ahead of fellow Belgian Freddie Loix. Tommy Mäkinen now has 55 points and still leads the Drivers' World Rally Championship from Carlos Sainz, who has 47, but McRae's win has lifted him to third place. 2 drivers in the top 4 has helped Subaru to extend their lead in the Manufacturers' Series to 40 points, with Ford now just 10 points behind Mitsubishi. As Top Gear Motorsport heads for its summer break, the championship next visits South America, where the refuelling row is bound to resurface. To add to his victory in Greece, the achievement of becoming Britain's first ever World Rally Champion